Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Kelly McDevitt of IBI, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that is very near and dear to our employers' hearts, and that is making hybrid and remote work for you. This is a big topic as I sit down and speak with employers over the last year. Obviously, we've all been doing our darndest to keep our employees both satisfied at work and trying to meet business goals. And to do that, we've really had to flex our work arrangements. And when we start talking about those who will remain hybrid or fully remote, we've struggled over the last year or so around how to create and sustain a culture in that environment. We've talked about the return to work options, meeting different people's needs at different times. We've talked about the precedent that we've set over the last 4 years for people working at home, and how we have some of our workforce that has known nothing else, have never been in an office, and were hired as hybrid or remote workers. And so, as always, we present the research findings from our researcher, that in this case is Carole Bonner. And then we also have a nice discussion with one of our employer board members. Today we have Cindy Perry from PwC with us. We are so thankful for having her. But Carole is going to first present the research. There is a chat, and we will have Q&A as well. If you'd like to ask questions during the presentation, I will monitor those while Carole is presenting and be happy to answer those as we go. And then after we get into the discussion with Cindy, we will monitor the Q&A and save the questions for the end of the presentation. So I'm going to kick it over to Carole, and she's going to present the research findings.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar on making hybrid and remote work for everyone. I'm Carole Bonner. I'm the lead researcher on this project, and I'll guide you through the research behind optimizing health and productivity in hybrid and remote work environments. We're going to look a little bit at the background, which includes data sources and methods. Then we'll dive into survey findings and case study results. After that, we'll talk about the implications of the results. And then we'll hear from Cindy. And remember, as Kelly mentioned, that as we go through, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll address them as we move along. I want to set the stage by clarifying some terminology. Different terms mean different things to different people. So we'll be talking about flexible work arrangements, which just means an alternative setup from the traditional office setup. Remote work, of course, is work from home or telecommuting. It allows employees to work from outside the office. Hybrid work is a combination of the two, in office, part-time, remotely the rest of the time. But then we have hybrid home first, which is 3 to 4 days from the office. And we have hybrid office first, which is 3 to 4 days on site. The term flexibility, don't get it confused with flexible work arrangements. Flexibility means the freedom of employees to choose and change when, where, how they help align their the organizational goals with their individual goals. And then post-pandemic, we're talking about the endemic era when the disease is spreading at a normal or expected rate. But for this study, we're using September 2022 to present. There's no hard line. But we chose that date. It is a multiple method study. On the quantitative leg, we'll explore employers and employees' post-pandemic work plans. We'll dive into the advantages and challenges of remote and on-site work. On the qualitative side, we'll uncover how different companies use flexible work arrangements and the benefits and challenges they face. Just let me say that these slides will be available after the webinar, and the full report is available. It's a lot of information, and that will give you the opportunity to sort of take it in. So our research draws on robust data sources. The survey of working arrangements and attitudes collects data on worker experiences and attitudes towards working arrangements. It's a monthly survey paid for in part by the National Bureau of Economic Research. It began in May 2020 and continues with monthly releases. It is validated against the U.S. Census Bureau data and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Stats data sets. The SWAY is publicly available and nationally representative. So this analysis looks at how things work together to shape the future of work. 78% of employers have already made plans for how they will use flexible work arrangements in the future. Flexible meaning both remote and hybrid. That leaves 22% of those employers who are more likely to go back to the office full-time. As we try to figure out how the workplace is changing, we're going to look at the delicate balance between employee preferences and employer strategies. There's a significant difference between what employees prefer and what employers are planning to do. The idea of fully on-site and fully remote work arrangements seems to be a source of disagreement. About 15% of employees who are able to work from home say they would rather work full-time in office compared to 22% of employers who plan for them to. Similarly, 29% of employees who are able to work from home say they would rather work fully remote compared to 23% of employers who plan for them to. This is dubbed as the great mismatch, but this contrast makes it clear how hard it is to create a new normal. Yes, Kelly?
And I just want to mention, a year ago, this would have been a different looking graph. So I think we've moved beyond employee preference into probably in the last 18 months, employee demand, right? So it was, well, since I started working at home, I want to stay at home. I don't want to go back to the office. That's my preference. I sold my car. I moved out of the city, blah, blah, blah. Then we moved into, over the last 18 months, I'm not coming back to the office. I'm leaving if you make me. And I think we're now, this pendulum is swinging all the way across at this point. Now we're getting to a place, as you see in the news, from large employers who are making headlines with a return to office strategy of come back or else. And I'm not saying one of those strategies is right over the other. You know what's best for your culture. But I think that the power dynamic has shifted a bit, where it was in the employee's court for the last 3 years, and now it's moving back to the employer's court. The job market is very different today than it was a year ago. And so I think that's probably why we see more employers taking a harder stance and saying, for all intents and purposes, we want to get back to normal. Our culture is not thriving. Our people are not thriving. And surely our business goals and metrics may not be thriving. And so we've got to do something to get us back to where we were from a productivity, absence, mental health, connectivity, creating company cultures perspective, where we were before the pandemic hit. And so using that as a baseline, I think more employers are taking a harder stance. And that's very different than what we've seen over the last 18 months. So keep in mind, as we go into the conversation with Cindy later, how to approach this in a way that is meeting employees' needs. And when I say needs, just because they say they want something doesn't mean it's best for them, right? But meeting employees' needs and business goals as we go through the presentation. Go ahead, Carole.
Kelly, when you look closer, you'll see that there is agreement on hybrid arrangements. Both employees and employers agree that the hybrid model is the best solution and plan to use it. That's 56% of the respondents. So, cross-sectionally, we look at, starting with industries, we see a trend where some are more likely to plan work setups that are all done on site. And this is, remember that this is employees who are capable of remote work. So hospitality and food services, education, transportation and storage, and retail trade. No surprises there. Because these industries have frontline workers who have hands-on work and need to talk to people in person, employers of remote capable employees tend to prefer work arrangements that take place on site. Geographically, the Mid-Atlantic region, which is New York, Pennsylvania, more employers were found to be planning fully on-site work. This trend is also true for the Pacific region, which is California, Alaska, Washington, and Oregon. These areas, which often have dense urban centers and different ways of doing business, seem to plan full site work more often. Interesting patterns as we dig deeper, factors that affect the use of flexible work setups, that is both remote and hybrid. In terms of industries, the professional and business services and finance and insurance sectors stand out. In these fields, it's more likely that remote capable employees are in flexible work arrangements such as fully remote or hybrid. In terms of location, West, North, Central part of the US are also more likely to be in flexible work arrangements as the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri. And as we look at the size of the company, there's a clear pattern. Smaller companies are more likely to be flexible. Talent wars. This slide shows an interesting statistic, and Kelly alluded to it, that shows how important flexibility has become in today's labor force. Think about this. If employers made it clear that employees had to be at work 5 days a week or full-time, surprisingly, about half the employees would make a firm choice. They would quit. This would happen in two ways. Some people would leave right away without even having another job lined up, and others would start looking for a job that fit their desired work. It's important to note that this number has gone up since the time of the pandemic. It was 40%, which is still high. But after September 2022, it went up to 47%. This 17% change came from the number who would quit without even having another offer on the table. And this shows how work arrangements that meet the changing needs of employees' are becoming more and more important. As we move through a world after the pandemic, the value of flexibility has become clear, which affects the decisions that employees are willing to make. So as the workforce changes and people try to find a balance between work and personal life, being able to offer flexible work options becomes a powerful way to attract and keep skilled workers. So we look at attraction. We talk about workforce preferences. A question was posed: if you were guaranteed the opportunity to work from home, would you pursue it? So this simple question unveiled a powerful trend that holds implications for attraction and retention. About 55% of respondents would seek out a work from home position if guaranteed, either definitely or probably. What adds depth to this insight is the context of change over time. So again, during pandemic time was lower. It's gone up, 11% increase in individuals who are inclined to seek out that work from home position. Organizations that recognize and cater to these evolving desires stand to attract and retain talent, right? This is not just a trend, it's an opportunity that can shape the future of work. So we want to know why. What are the benefits and the challenges? Reduced commutes are a win-win. We know that. It doesn't stop there, though. Remote work, the advantages extend far beyond reduced commutes. So remote work experience is often marked by a sense of balance and higher engagement. Allowing employees to weave their personal and professional lives seamlessly. This results in increased efficiency for 47% of respondents. This is nearly half of remote workers who experience heightened efficiency, meaning better use of their time, due to factors such as quieter home environments, reduced stress, optimized time management, better internet quality, shorter meetings, better equipment. Challenges: 11% experience decreased efficiency. Some roles involve tasks that are inherently challenging to perform remotely, often due to the need for specialized equipment or in-person interactions. And so these employees are kind of slow down if they're working, say, hybrid. They have to put things off to another day. Go ahead, Kelly.
Just want folks to think about, and this is, the reason why we did this mixed methodology, because this is changing by the minute.
Yes.
Right. So we also did a research project last year on mental health status of remote workers. And remember, this is self-reported data. These are employees who are saying that it's quieter at home, they feel less stressed, they can do their stuff around the house while they're working, their internet is better. And yet, when we asked them about their mental health status, they said they were more anxious, depressed, isolated, lonely, etc. And so this is my point of, just because they say they like it better doesn't mean it's better for them. So this is sort of this real balance that we're trying to strike here. We want people to be more productive at home. We want people to be better mentally stable at home. But we also want them to feel part of a community at work. We also want them to feel connected to their supervisors. And our previous research shows that they were not. And so this is why this is such a hot topic right now. How do you balance what they say they want with what they really need? And then probably most importantly now in today's environment that we live in with, inflation and cost pressures from up above and attraction, retention, and turnover, business goals. Because they say they're more productive at home, does that mean they are more productive at home? If you are measuring from an employer's perspective, this is where Carole is telling us those two things don't always meet or relate. And therein kind of lies the problem solving for your population. You have to know your culture and your people.
It is nuanced. It's a nuanced reality. And the strategies to address challenges are as crucial as capitalizing on the benefits. I thought I could not mention all of the things, all of the findings, but I thought it was important to mention the changes in mentoring. Employees are spending more time being mentored when hybrid and remote, and spending more time mentoring others when fully on site and in the office 3 or 4 days. So again, it's nuanced, but these opportunities are important. Also, discussing performance with your supervisor. This is a critical activity, and it enables employees to receive timely feedback, set goals, address challenges, and it does result in improved performance. Also, formal training and professional development. They're spending more time on these activities when hybrid and remote. So, shifting to the qualitative approach, we looked at case studies. I selected these companies from Fortune's 100 Best Companies to Work For, and I might mention that PwC is also one of those companies. And the reason that I chose them from those companies is captured in this quote at the bottom. Despite a record number of resignations and reprioritizations of American lives, the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For did not entice employees with flashy perks, but instead concentrated on the fundamentals of strong company culture. It's employee well-being, inclusion, purpose, genuine listening, caring, and empathy. So we chose the companies from that group to understand that that's their focus, and that's what is needed. So we looked at Capital One, HubSpot, Hilton, and Stryker. And the findings were extensive, so I'm going to skim over the collective findings. Several companies offered hybrid remote work models, but the distribution of remote versus on-site varied. And it also varied within the companies. So it depended on your team, your projects you were working on, so on and so forth. Capital One and HubSpot had specific days for on-site work, and that's to address that situation that Kelly talks about, where you come into the office and everybody's Zooming or nobody's there. So they set those specific days for collaboration and in-person contact. HubSpot has a more frequent office visit requirement compared to the other companies. So even they're fully remote, they require 1 or 2 times per quarter to visit a site. Hilton was very unique. They have corporate travel privileges, so their corporate employees could work from wherever their privileges took them. But they had a comprehensive suite of flexible options for frontline employees. And those flexibilities looked a little different. It was in the payment structure, their work schedule. They could even choose the department they wish to work in. They also could receive their salaries as they accrued. Call center employees customized their work hours. They had reduced schedule options that they could do intermittently if they chose. So each company's approach reflects its unique priorities, the business needs, the culture, and adapting to remote work and flexibility. There were benefits and challenges across the board, and the ones I have listed here are, and in the report are even more, are the ones that the company pointed to. Some of them are across the board, no doubt, but the company recognized these benefits. Improved work-life balances was across the board, enhanced engagement, our key benefits. Challenges was balancing personal and professional life and those boundaries, and remote relationship building for challenges. Capital One and HubSpot highlight commute reduction, and efficient work schedules, while Hilton focused on retaining employees and cultivating loyalty. Stryker focused on empowering engagement through flexibility and talent attraction.
So I want to hit on one thing on the prior slide, Carole, and that is something that's coming up more and more. We're going to talk with Cindy about in a minute, is the potential rift between on-site and remote workers is a big one, and proximity biases. And so, you know, as you've seen in the news, some employers are taking the approach, if you live within X number of miles of the office, you're coming into the office. If you don't, because you've moved away or you weren't hired as a remote worker in the first place, you must come back. And that doesn't sit well with people that have only ever been remote, even if their job description when hired wasn't remote, permanent remote, it was pandemic remote. But that you're creating an equity imbalance in employees' eyes. So I want everybody to kind of keep in the back of their minds. If you remember pre-pandemic, we had people who were hired as remote workers, or you know, in a call center or a production environment, claims processors, etc. You had to work in the office for a year, and you had to earn the right to work at home. But once you did, your job description was a remote worker. You were considered a remote worker. I think that we have to sort of put that piece aside. If you were hired for a job that was remote work, permanent remote work, that's one thing, and maybe you have some of these potential challenges. But those who weren't hired as a permanent remote worker, I think people have forgotten that it's up to the employer to say whether a job description is remote or not. And so the rifts that are occurring between those who can work remotely and those who cannot, based on their job description, is becoming more and more difficult for employers to kind of handle from an equity perspective.
Right. And that's one of the reasons that Hilton jumped out at me, because they addressed it with these privileges that frontline employees have, that the corporate employees don't. So just everybody is different. There's no one solution. Supports are in place. Common supports, they all provide mental health coverage with varying numbers of free sessions per year. There was support for work-life balance, employee well-being. They all focused on skill building and professional development. They all had some form of remote work stipend or allowance. Some of them were monthly. Some of them were earmarked for self-care. Some were use it for whatever you want. Some of the all of the companies offered manager training for better support and understanding of employee needs. This is helpful in the culture shift. But there were some differences. Some companies offered specific resources for caregiving. I think it was Hilton who offered caregiving. Could be child care, it could be parent care, it could be friend care, could be pet care. It didn't matter. You could use your stipend however you wanted. You had a certain number of days that you could take. I thought that was unique. There are different approaches to workplace setup, workspace. HubSpot set up the home offices for those who were fully remote and offered a hotel desk for those that were home first. So, and there was varying emphasis on community building, team activities. Overall, the companies exhibited a range of strategies to support hybrid and remote work, showcasing their commitment to employee well-being, mental health, skill development, and adapting to the changing work. A common thread that ran through both the quantitative and the qualitative was flexibility was the feature that made the work arrangement most effective. That is flexible hours, days, location. It's on a spectrum. And according to a study by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, remote work flexibility, work schedules, and compressed work schedules were widely used in tandem to provide employees with additional flexibility. Employers who were less liberal with their flexible work arrangements compensated their employers with higher rates, according to data. Multiple studies indicated that employees with flexible schedules or more flexibility had higher levels of well-being, engagement, and organizational commitment than those with non-flexible schedules. So employers should be aware that the severity of the influence was according to the degree of flexibility. So you had the more flexible, the higher the well-being, engagement, organizational commitment. It was linear. So employees, when they can manage their own schedules flexibly, use their time more efficiently, avoiding potential negative effects such as burnout. So to wrap up, the key points, number one is there's no one size fits all. As a result of significant shifts in the workplace, it's taking longer than expected to find a balance that works for the majority of companies and employees. Competing desires is Capital 101. It has always existed in a capitalistic society, but we're in a unique position to analyze and discuss them in hopes of discovering something that just isn't just a bitter compromise, but could actually create a better, more balanced, and more profitable workplace for all. So summarizing, there are benefits to remote work as well as on-site work. Flexibility maximizes those benefits. Employers and employees agree on hybrid. Culture must be recultivated. Success requires flexibility and intentionality. Appropriate supports are crucial. And with all of that said, perhaps hybrid is the best of both worlds. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Kelly.
All right. Thank you, Carole, for all that great information. And for those of you who are members of IBI, you know that Carole's research paper and the infographic for this particular research piece are available on our website for our members. And it does go into many more findings and details than we presented on the webinar today. So I want to let, first of all, Cindy Perry introduce herself. Cindy is from PwC, one of our board members, and I'd like to let her introduce herself, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Perry. I'm the National Benefits Leader at PwC. I have been with the firm a little less than 2 years now, actually, and couldn't have made a better career decision, and I'm happy to be with you all here today.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, for joining us. So we talked about a lot in the last half hour, and we've been talking about this subject over and over again as we talk with employers this year. It's just been one of the biggest challenges, I think, for employers to find the right footing for the right people. Obviously, from Carole's research, we talked about, the pros and cons of both. And this kind of strange reflection point that we're at right now, where maybe the pendulum is swinging a little bit back towards the employer, who is, we all are, kind of struggling with perhaps short staff, perhaps economic reasons from, your CFO coming down, that we have to have cost savings. Obviously, the market has seen many layoffs in the last 6 months. And so employers are having to make hard decisions that we weren't making 3 years ago about what is good for my employees versus what is good for my business, when those don't necessarily meet in the middle. So I want to break down some of the key pieces of that discussion that Carole presented. And the first one is culture. How in the world do we create a culture for people, first of all, who may have never been in an office before? We discussed this. My whole team, I hired my team, and we've never had an office since they all started. The water cooler conversation days, for those of you who know what a water cooler is, was real. You could be creative and interactive and ideate on ideas and search out support and support each other as a team when you were all there together. How does one create a culture when you're doing it virtually on Zoom?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I joined the firm. Remember, I said it was a little less than 2 years ago. So, I joined 100% remote. I work from my home here in Houston, but one of the things that attracted me to PwC was this legacy of a rich culture, where people are coming together, they're working hard, they're ideating, they're sharing. There's a lot of mentorship. There's a lot of fun in the work that we do. But when I started, again, I work here in Houston, and the bulk of my team, and this may not be uncommon to several of you who are on the call, the bulk of my team is on the East Coast. And it became really challenging initially. While I enjoy the flexibility of working from home, being able to build those meaningful connections with my colleagues was difficult. One of the things that the firm has employed, among several, to kind of help our people with that, I'm not the only one who's working remotely or hybridly, is our inclusion networks. So we have over 11 inclusion networks here at the firm. About 20,000 or more of our people are involved in those inclusion networks. And one of the strategies that we encourage our inclusion network leaders to employ locally is to host on-site events. We recognize that it's not enough to just tell people to come into the office, but they need to have a reason to come into the office. And, I've had those days where I have gone downtown Houston, I've paid to park just to try to connect, but then I end up in the office on Zoom from sun up to sundown, and I leave. I haven't met anybody new. I didn't talk to anybody new. And after a while, it's just like, yeah, no, this doesn't work.
Right.
So, there's a lot of on-site events that we've started having, right, to just try to build those times of connections. But beyond that, we encourage our people to get involved in the inclusion networks because they find spaces that resonate with them. And then they can go into the office, plan meetings in office, meet with your team in office, meet with your inclusion network or an event in office. If your network is volunteering, we try to not just have people go into the office, but really try to encourage them to make those connections, spend the time collaborating with their team if they're able. People who may not be like me, maybe we have some of my team members are in Tampa, and it's a good variety, a good bulk of them that are in the Tampa office. I encourage them, hey, once or twice a week, why don't you all go meet up, have lunch, go into the office, get to know each other, get to connect with each other. And so I think by doing some of those things on a consistent basis and having leadership reinforce those things, having leadership present when we're asking people to come into the office, I think it makes a big difference.
I agree. And I think the whole intentionality of that, there's nothing worse than making someone mad that they have to go back to work to begin with. And then they get to work and there's no one there to be creative with, and they're Zooming all day. I mean, you're just kind of putting salt on the wound at that point. I want to talk about the inclusion networks because I think one of the other things which we didn't talk about a whole lot in this research, and it's hard to pull out, is that I believe, just my opinion, but I think the pandemic as a whole, but even these flexible work arrangements are not always best for people who were already marginalized.
Yeah.
And so if you have people who are disconnected either by geography or food deserts or care deserts or whatever the case may be, financially disenfranchised, you're just making it worse. And so they're kind of out there on their own. And at least when they were in the office, you know, the folks who knew Bob while Bob was in the office could say, something's wrong with Bob this week. Bob doesn't seem himself, right? Bob's struggling. It looks like he's struggling with his health. We've kind of lost that connection. And I love your inclusion networks may actually be making up for that. So tell me a little bit more about those. Are your employees, I know a lot of the, you know, employer resource groups, the ERGs are led fully by employees and decided on by employees. So they pick the topic or the reason that the folks are coming together. How does yours work?
Yeah, these are employee-led networks. They may each have a partner sponsor, but you know, they're led by the employees. We have inclusion networks at the national level, and each of the networks, so let's say if we set our I'm a member of BIN, right? We have them based on, it could be our women's inclusion network, it could be a technology inclusion network, or our Pan-Asian, you know, population network. These are employee-led, and so there's a national sponsor, and then at each location, you will have a subset of that national inclusion network that is represented at the local level.
Right.
And so it allows you not just to glean ideas from a broader network of people, but then you can also make those ideas a reality at the local level. And, you know, I'll use myself as an example, really just wanting to be connected. I realized when I went to a holiday party, I didn't know anyone. So I'm at the holiday party. I don't know anybody. I got to get involved. And so based on, you know, either my preferences, my interest, you know, I made the intentional effort to get involved. And we try to make sure all of our colleagues know what's available to them. And then if there's an inclusion network that isn't, you know, maybe there's a population or group of people who want to come together, then they also have the opportunity to create those networks and help to bridge that connection.
I love that. And honestly, it gives another good reason for people to come together because they have something in common, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to skip to the Holy Grail. And that is, how are you looking at this idea that employees say, self-reported, that I want to work at home full time. I don't want to do hybrid. I don't want to come back to the office, but obviously the companies who have taken the steps to bring people back, whether it's part-time, full-time, incremental time, etc., there's a reason they're doing that. And it's usually because their data shows that business metrics aren't being met, that creativity metrics aren't being met, that maybe it's production metrics that aren't being met. For whatever reason, there is an impetus. And sometimes it's because they've been paying for office space for 4 years for empty office. That's not a good cost benefit analysis, right? We can't just keep paying for big office buildings that no one is in.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you balancing what employees say they must have, almost demanding at this point, to what the business must also have?
Yeah. So, and that is a balance. There are the core business needs. At PwC, we don't make widgets. You know, our people are our greatest and biggest asset. And we leverage our people as resources, you know, for our clients. And so the way we've navigated that is we just continue to build on, we really had a long-standing tradition at the firm where we allow our people to work flexibly. That hasn't changed. We continue to do that. And we quite doubled down a little bit during the pandemic to think about more creative ways that we can allow people to work in ways that meet their needs. We recognize that a healthy workforce, a happy workforce, a workforce that is able to kind of hone in on their creativity, we can use the best of what our people have to give. And so when we invested in our My Plus strategy, one of, you know, several of those quadrants around well-being, rewards, and benefits, leadership and development. We made an intentional investment in our people, but we also allowed them to think about what ways of working work best for them. But also, we have clients, we have people who go see clients. And so we also have to think about what the client needs are. And so if the client, says they need somebody on site, well, you got to be on site today. If the client is okay with you working virtually and you're okay with working virtually, you can be virtual today. I think the big thing is just having that year-round flexibility, because that's not always the case. It's really not one size fits all. It's not, hey, you're on site all the time or you're at home all the time. We really try to encourage our people we have to respond to the needs of the business. We have to meet the needs of our clients, but we also think about and encourage our people to think about what works best for them. And so we've put in a variety of options for people to work flexibly. We have compressed work weeks. So maybe you can do it. You don't have to do it in a 5-day work week. Maybe you can take that 5-day work week and compress it down into 3 or 4 days. We allow people the flexibility to do that. We have flex time. So if people need to work outside of the normal operating hours, if you think the traditional kind of 8 to 5, if someone needs 7 to 4, we give people the option and the flexibility to do that. Of course, people can work at a reduced schedule. We have a 20% pay LOA option where if someone says, hey, I want to scale back quite a bit, right? You can do that and still maintain employee at the firm and leverage those things as you need them throughout the year. But I think the main thing for us is that it wasn't something that is mandated. We wanted to make sure our people had the flexibility to work in a way that works for them, while also acknowledging that we have to meet our client needs. And so what that looks like real practically, Kelly, is maybe we have someone who's at a client site. They need to be there from September to December.
Right.
And they're there on the client site as often as the client needs. But January through March, maybe they can work hybrid, or they can have a flex schedule if that's what they need. They can leverage the options that we have for them throughout the course of the year to work the way that works for them.
Well, and I love that because it also gives those that we talked about earlier who have never really worked in an office environment a chance to taste a little bit of that. Yeah. And to experience that. For those who, one of our folks was commenting in the Q&A, our disenfranchised population, I said this often, I was an evangelist about it, when we sent people home during the pandemic. First of all, we didn't know what environment we were sending them home into. We could have been sending them home into unsafe environments. We also could have been sending them home into a food desert where work and the cafeteria was the only good meal they had every day. Yeah. Or, access to air conditioning, because they don't have that at home, and you're in downtown Louisiana and you got, 100-degree weather. That may be the most comfortable place they ever had was in the office. And so when we think about allowing people to come back to the office, it may not just be because it's their preference. It honestly may be what is better and best for them. But it also gives them the opportunity for those who never had it to experience it. Yeah. And maybe in your progression for employers who do have a long-term goal of being back in the office at least most of the time for most of the jobs, who haven't sold all their office space or moved on from that already, maybe it's okay for people to try it. And that flexibility that you all are offering, I think really is admirable, because you're giving people who may have not had that chance before to try it, and they may love it.
Yeah. And there's no doubt that working from home, sometimes you can feel isolated. You miss people, right? We're not designed to kind of operate in a vacuum. People need people. I mean, we get some of the best ideas when people are coming together, just thinking, you hear 2 heads are better than one. Like, that's true. Sometimes I could think of something here at my desk and I get with my team and it's bigger, it's better. And so being able to leverage that is really important. I think having that flexibility. And to your point about not knowing what environment we're sending people home to, sometimes the workplace is the place of peace. Or if you go home, you don't have access to resources that you may have had access to if you went into the office. And so I think, around and what undergirds that flexible work structure is an infrastructure of mental health resources in a variety of different ways, right? So you could engage face to face, you could engage virtually, people giving people the option to engage via apps and other tools and resources. We have well-being coaches on site at some of our locations. So our people can, beyond our app-based services, they can actually speak with a coach. I think Carole mentioned in her presentation that there's a lot more intentionality about having conversations, feedback conversations, and strategy conversations. It's because people are trying to be extremely intentional about making sure, even though they're apart, that they're still able to develop, that they're still able to grow and meet the demands of their day-to-day job. And it does require that level of intentionality. We've put in something called My Feedback, and it is a systematic way for me as a managing director. I could send several feedback questions, a very quick survey to my team just to say, how am I doing? How can I support you? I know you're thousands of miles away, but what can I do to help support you? And I think by leveraging those types of tools, again, it helps people feel connected. It helps them operationalize this flexibility that that we're all enjoying at this time, and it makes a difference in the lives of our people.
I love that, because one of the first research projects we did on the hybrid, and Carole did this project as well, on the hybrid work arrangement, we found that one of the biggest complaints on people working at home was that they didn't know what their employers, or more specifically, their direct managers or supervisors, expected of them. It's hard to understand, when you're having one team meeting a week on a Zoom, where do I fit in, right? What is my role here on this team? How can I contribute? How can I receive feedback? What do they want from me? That was one of the biggest findings that we saw in the research, was this disconnectedness, especially from their supervisors. So I love that you have a vehicle that you're asking them, what do you need? What can I do for you? I want to go back to the on-site idea. We have a lot of employers, large employers, who have made huge investments on on-site resources, like you talked about, including very large on-site clinics, sometimes an on-site pharmacy, sometimes on-site PT, and all those resources sort of got shut down. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for employers that may still have those things sitting there, and now their people don't have access to them? How does one balance that investment with who's really utilizing it at this point? Is there hope that we will utilize those things again someday?
Yeah, that is a balance. One, if you plan to have your people coming back into the office, then maybe it's worth continuing your investment in those resources, if you know for sure that you're going to have people back into the offices. One of the other things is communicating. I think another really good way, I don't have a massage chair at home, but you know what? I might have a sleep pod at the office that allows me to come in and enjoy the best of both worlds. I can work, and if I need a little nap, I can go into the pod, or I can go play ping pong. All of those things that we put into the offices to make offices a great place to be, that now people aren't leveraging. The other thing that I'll say is, if you know that that's not something that's being heavily utilized, then we need to start thinking about what options virtually do we have. So if it's physical therapists or those sorts of things, think of other point solutions. I won't name any.
I know
we could probably all think of several point solutions that help our people get a good stretch, or do online physical therapy. There's, depending on the platform that you use, some of the software and platforms that we use to do our day-to-day work, they have embedded apps and tools that you can use to just say, hey, make sure your people are standing. You can do a team stretch, if you will. Being able to maintain well-being is really important. And there are creative ways to do that, utilizing the technological resources that are out there. We instantly go to apps a lot of times, and there's a place for that. But I think there are ways that some of the platforms that we use to do our work have embedded that into their systems that we could leverage as well. And so we just did a team meeting out of town, and some of us were there and some of us were online. But we, in the middle of the team meeting, we popped in one of those apps that was part of our platform and said, now we're going to take a minute and we're going to breathe together. We're going to stretch together. We're just going to make sure that we laugh together while stretching and maintaining well-being at the same time. I think organizations have to get creative to think about how to do that. But there are a ton of resources out there that are available to employ if you know your on-site resources aren't going to get utilized.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Last question for you. Where do you think you'll go from here? Is your goal to continue to measure your programs that you have, your point solutions that you have in place, constant measurement, constant monitoring, to know that what you've put in is working? Because that's very important. And I think in the last 4 years, we put in so many things, so many point solutions, many of them digital. And many of them it wasn't like it was a big choice. We needed to surround our people with care and with support in a virtual environment. But now we're kind of looking back and going, did those work? Did you like them? I'm not really sure, right? Some of them didn't have a lot of data or proof points that came along with them. Mm-hmm. Where do you now go from here as you look forward and knowing that probably some sort of flexibility or remote or hybrid or something is going to be in place for quite a while? How do you know that you're on the right track? How are you tracking?
Of course, there's the standard, we monitor our utilization metrics. We've put in a ton of things. We want to know what's working. And then we listen to our people. We ask, what things are important to you? What things would you like to see a little bit more of or a little less of? What are you concerned about? And then we try to respond in ways that meet the diverse needs of our population. And even once we do that, we still have to monitor. So I don't think there's ever a time where we're going to get away from looking at utilization compared to cost to offer, because there is that, right? We have people using everything that we offer, but 2% utilization may or may not be the target that we were trying to go for. And so it's constantly evaluating by looking at those metrics and then asking our people and then responding to their needs. And sometimes it takes us a couple of tries to get it right. There are things that maybe we can't respond to. We try not to ask those types of questions. But
it's a fair point, Cindy. You can't be everything to everyone all the time. You can't. And so you have to meet employee concerns and preferences with business demands. And so being all things to all people is a recipe for failure for sure. But I love the fact that you're asking, and you and I have talked about this before. I also love the fact that you're redefining. I think the days of acceptance of engagement of 2% is over. And so, I always tell these point solutions as they open up and launch, you better have some different proof points in your deck. Yeah. Just because I answered the phone doesn't mean I'm engaged. So we're going to have to kind of redefine as we go forward what we expect from these types of products and programs, right?
Yeah, and look at their roadmap. Where are you going? I know where you are today based on a set of needs. Are you forecasting? And where are you going? We can tell you where our population is headed. Will you be able to meet us there when we get there? Or do we need to look for another solution? Those are the things that I want to know at least at an annual business review. Every year I want to know where you headed. And if the answer is, well, we haven't thought about that, then, our people, we change. And so we have to take a really good look. And then we explain to our people. I think we try to, in addition to all of those things, I think maintaining a level of transparency.
I love it.
With our people to say, hey, we had this, we no longer have this, but we have this. And here's why.
Here's why.
Yeah, we've repurposed those funds for this because it meets a greater need. And hopefully by, we continue to try, to do those things with, good response from our people, as we can see by our ranking on 100.
Best place to work. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time.
you.
And our employers certainly want to hear from other employers about what's working and what's not, what the challenges are and how we relate to them amongst ourselves. But I really appreciate your expertise, and you guys are doing a great job. It doesn't surprise me why people do want to work at PwC, because you've got great products and programs and you have great care for your employees. So thank you for joining us today. Carole, thank you for presenting and for doing this research project. As I said, we answered all the questions in the Q&A, so we're good there, but the papers are available on the website for the IBI members. For non-members, they are embargoed for 90 days, and then after that time are available to the public. So thank you everybody for joining. Have a great day.